Thank you for joining me. I'm William Earnhardt, the pastor of the Bushnell, Homosassa, and Inverness, Florida, Seventh-day Adventist churches. And usually when we come together, we're talking about Bible beliefs. But is just believing enough? In Matthew chapter 16, Jesus and Peter are having what you would call a pretty fierce conversation. Jesus has just been recognized as the Christ by Peter, but Jesus lets Peter know that he's going to be crucified. And Peter's response to this is like, no way, you're not going to die. None of us are going to die. You're not going to die. That's not going to happen. And Jesus looks at Peter. He doesn't call Peter Satan. He knows that he's not wrestling with Peter. He's not wrestling with flesh and blood. But there's a spirit working in this situation. We wrestle against wicked spirits in high places, not against flesh and blood. So Peter is telling Jesus, no way you're going to die. That will never happen. And Jesus realized that spirit was coming from Satan. And so he says, get behind me, Satan. And he says, you don't know the things of God. You only know the things of men. You're thinking like a man. He's talking to Peter, but again, he knows the spirit behind that. And so Peter was having the same reaction many of us have when it comes to the idea of dying to self. No way, that's not going to happen. No, Jesus, you don't have to die to self. We're not going to die to self. How many times does that happen even in what we call Christianity today? We want to subscribe to a set of beliefs, but we don't want to die to self. And Jesus tells us here in that conversation that he's having with Peter in Matthew 16, in verse 24 of Matthew 16, it says, then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. So here Jesus isn't telling us to subscribe to a certain set of beliefs. When he tells us to pick up our cross and follow him, what he's saying is you need to come die with me. And that is where many disciples, even today, turn away. They're happy to believe, but they don't want to pick up their cross and follow Jesus to go die with him. In my Bible worker ministry, for years, I've studied with people that wanted to study. They loved the theory of things. They loved discussing the Bible. But when it came to actual Bible teachings, like the Sabbath, or maybe health reform, I lost them because now we had transitioned from believing something, believing certain things. Now we had transitioned to actual changes being made in our lives. And many people are happy to believe certain things. They just don't want their life to be changed. But Jesus isn't telling us to believe a certain way only. He's telling us to do something. Pick up your cross, come die with me. And again, as a Bible worker in the church, the concern I have in the Christian world today isn't just that a lot of the Christian world has forgotten the Sabbath. A lot of the Christian world, including Adventists, have forgotten that there's a cross, that we're invited to die to self. When we read the Bible, we know that we're saved by faith. But when we're following the teachings and listening to the teachings of Jesus, and Jesus taught us we're saved by believing, but we're saved from sin to obedience. Ephesians 2:8 and 9 tells us we're saved by grace, not by works, But then Ephesians 2:10 tells us that grace brings us good works. So it's not, again, just believing something, it's acting a certain way, making changes in our life, letting God's word change the way that we live. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 16, Jesus is telling those who want to be his disciples, let people see your good works, that they may glorify your Father in heaven. Notice, Jesus didn't say, let everybody see what you believe. No. He says, let them see your good works, that they may glorify your Father who's in heaven. In Matthew chapter 25, beginning with verse 34, we have the parable of the sheep and the goats. Those on the right hand, Jesus says, come into my kingdom. And he tells them why. Right there in Matthew 25, he says, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was sick, you came to visit me. When I was in prison, you came to see me. When I was naked, you clothed me. Come into the kingdom. Notice in that parable, he doesn't tell anybody to come into the kingdom because of what they believed. He tells them to come into the kingdom because of the way they treated people. And so as we continue looking at different beliefs and everything, I think it's very important that we pause for a moment and we realize being a disciple of Jesus is way more than just believing a certain way. It is a life-changing experience, changing the way that we live. And again, when people look at the Sabbath and they're like, oh no, what a burden. And I'm like, wait a minute, we set aside a day for Jesus and that's a burden? Really? When we fall in love with Jesus, we delight to do his commandments. We don't find them burdensome. We do them because we love Jesus. And this is the difference between just calling ourselves Christians and being an actual follower of Jesus. As a matter of fact, I know many people now that aren't calling themselves Christians because a lot of people call themselves Christians, but they don't pick up their cross and follow Jesus. And so a lot of people, to be more specific and more intentional, are now saying, I am a Christ follower. And if we follow Christ, that means we pick up our cross and we go to die to self. In Luke chapter 10, the story of the Good Samaritan. The priest and the Levi had their theology all right up here, but they didn't have it in the heart. The Samaritan might have been confused about some things right here, but he had his heart right. And friends, there will be millions, if not billions, of people in heaven who have muddled theology, but there will be none with bitter hearts. Jesus commended the Samaritan, not because of what he believed, but because of what he did. In Galatians 5:6, it talks about a faith that works by love. And a lot of people in theology, they get confused. Well, is it faith? Is it works? Well, Paul tells us right there in Galatians 5:6, it's a faith that works. It's not a faith that just believes. It's a faith that works. And it works not by legalism. It doesn't work by a hope of reward. It doesn't work by pride. It doesn't work by fear of punishment. It is a faith that works by love. Friends, as I continue to study and grow, I have to stop and I have to evaluate my life. Am I just calling myself a Christian, or am I a follower of Christ? And so, friends, as we continue studying together and meeting together and talking about different doctrines and beliefs, I thought it was important for myself to stop and ask myself, am I a believer? Am I a Christian? Am I also a follower of Jesus? Meaning I more than believe, I more than understand. I pick up my cross to go die with Jesus. Because again, in the story of the Good Samaritan, that Samaritan well knew that whoever had robbed this man and thrown him in the ditch for dead could very well be hiding in the bushes ready to attack him. He knew there were risks. He knew the whole thing might have been a setup. But he did it knowing it might cost him his life. And I say that because today I'll be in Sabbath school discussions or small group Bible study discussions where we're studying the Good Samaritan, and somebody will speak up and say, well, wait a minute, you got to be careful today helping people because it could be dangerous today. And I'm like, wait a minute, it was dangerous in Jesus's day. The Good Samaritan didn't help the man because he knew it was safe. He knew it could cost him his life. Is Jesus calling us to do things that might cost us our very life? If we are a follower of Jesus, we will pick up our cross and go die with him. That can be spiritually, that could be dying to my ego, that could be literally dying. The only way I can find the courage to do that, which first of all, whether I give my life to Jesus or not, whether I go die with Jesus or not, I'm going to die anyway. So when we save our lives thinking, oh, I don't want to die, I don't want to pick up my cross, I don't want to go die, well, guess what? We're going to die anyway. But if we give our lives to Jesus, then he will save for us what we could never save for ourselves. More importantly, we pick up our cross for him because he picked up his cross for us. We give all of ourselves to Jesus. Again, not for pride, not for hope of reward, not out of fear of punishment. We give all of ourselves to Jesus out of love. It's a faith that works by love. Galatians 5:6. Friends, I hope that each one of us will take this matter seriously and decide more than just believing, more than just calling ourselves Christians, that we will be true disciples of Jesus, which means more than just believing certain things. It means doing the things that Jesus did, not in our own strength, not in our own power. He does it through us. That's what it talks about in Galatians 2:20. Not I, but Christ lives in me. My prayer is that each one of us will be more than just professed Christians. We will be literal followers of Jesus. God bless you.